All right, so if you're tuned in, it is 7th of August 2019, and this is the 8th month of the year with respect to time. It's just 14 minutes after 1 here on Joy 99.7. My name is Norvan Akwaheford. It is the Masterclass. Remember that our prayer here is that God will bless our homeland Ghana and make us great and strong. But I say, I am praying that that business of yours will be great and strong, which means that you move from the small pace that you are in to a faster one. You grow the business from that small number to a bigger one. Remember that the Masterclass is powered by Joy Business and is brought to you by Goyle. They say good energy. Goyle Henara Yedia. Okay, so what are we talking about today? We are looking at procurement, one important topic for the month of August. So for the 4 weeks or the 4 Wednesdays here, we'll be looking at procurement, how to do it right, and the difference between procurement and purchasing. And today we are so much privileged to have no other person to join us. That is, we're looking at speaking to the man who has been at the helm of affairs. I've known this man way back. And if you talk about the Public Procurement Authority, which is the PPA, this is the man, when he was set up, the first person that was at the helm of affairs. And it's no other person than Mr. ABJ, who is also currently or still the CEO for the PPA, or I would say the Public Procurement Authority. He's the one in the seat to take us through our class. If you have questions, if you have anything on your mind, why not? They are all welcome here. You can always send us WhatsApp on 0244340437. We are welcoming all those questions. We'll also open the phone line. So what you do is, I'm giving you those numbers now. Write them down. When it's time, I'll open them and you can ask all the questions that you want to ask. And the numbers are 0302 216-541 or 0244-340-437. Those are the phone numbers. When we open them, why not? And if you have to send your WhatsApp messages, as I said, it is 0244-340-437. And let me welcome my guest here with me in the studio. Good afternoon to you. Will I say my father? Or will I say my uncle? Because I've known him all the way from Takwa. Good afternoon to you, Mr. ABJ.
Good afternoon.
And thank you very much for coming. We are so grateful that you've joined us today. And we're going to be talking about procurement. That is an area I would say you are a master of. I mean, you really understand. You really understand what it is. And if you just tuned in, it is the Masterclass here on Joy 99.7, your super station here in Accra. And we're also live on Facebook. And so if you want to see what is happening in the studio, how the presentation is going, why not go to our Facebook page? That's Joy FM. And then you can always watch what is going on here as far as the Masterclass today is concerned. But how are you doing, my boss?
I'm doing very well, Novan.
Well, it's good. It's good. Now, I first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to hear a presentation from Mr. ABJ, and then when he's done, we'll welcome your questions, your contributions, and everything. And I'm sure that on your mind as you're listening to us, it's what is procurement? What is it about? How do I even participate in the procurement process? Government contracts, they advertise them in the papers, and then you are an SME, you're asking yourself, oh, I think I can supply these books or I can supply these materials that you are looking for. But you've always been wondering, how do I even start it? Or you hear tendering. What is it at all? And that is what Mr. J is going to be doing justice to. Let me give you the opportunity to take us through the class this afternoon, Mr. J.
All right. Thank you, Novan, and a very good afternoon to your listeners. It is a great opportunity indeed to share knowledge and experience in the field of procurement with your wonderful listeners across the country. I'm happy you want us to start to explain or define procurement and purchasing, because most people will tell you that the two are used interchangeably. But I'm afraid there is a distinction between the true meaning of the two terminologies. So let me start with procurement. If you want to define procurement, we will look at it as a set of tasks which are associated with buying a product or a service. It therefore becomes an umbrella term that covers tasks that happens before, during, and after the purchase of goods and services. So one would then ask, if procurement is involved in a set of tasks associated with buying a product or service, then what is purchasing? Because if you're talking about the tax involved in getting an item or a service procured, it is the same as saying you have purchased a product. But the difference here is that procurement activity starts from identification of needs and ends only when the need is fulfilled. Okay? Or when the need no longer exists. So let's look at what comes into play. An end-to-end procurement process. What is involved in the steps that you need to go through and follow. So an end-to-end procurement process will typically involve surveying the market, spotting potential suppliers, creating an approved list of vendors, spotting internal needs, creating a purchase order, requesting proposals, and evaluating quotations, selecting the right supplier and negotiating effectively, receiving the goods and performing quality checks, developing and managing contracts, obtaining invoices after supplies, and fulfilling payment terms. And in doing all this, you end up establishing a good supplier relationship. So if you talk about procurement, an end-to-end process of procurement, this will be some of the typical steps and activities that will involve in the whole cycle. And that is why I started by saying it is a set of tasks which is associated with the buying a product and or a service. Now, when you consider the definition I've given to procurement to that of purchasing, can we say that purchasing is a subset of procurement? Maybe yes, we can. The reason why we can is that purchasing is also described as a set of functions associated with acquiring the goods and services that an organization requires. So you're looking at a set of tasks associated in buying as against a set of functions associated with acquisition of goods and services. Now, purchasing therefore can be described as a small subset of the broader procurement function. And the process will normally and typically include the ordering, expediting, receiving, and fulfilling payment. Now, these functions I've just mentioned were also mentioned when I was giving the end-to-end process involving procurement. So if somebody is employed as a purchasing officer as compared to somebody who holds the position of a procurement officer, though here we can loosely interchange the two, but then I will always emphasize the point that most organizations have relegated the function of procurement to the background, mostly because of how they describe purchasing and not procurement. So then purchasing becomes more of a tactical, routine, clerical function as compared to procurement, which is supposed to be a strategic management function. Because of the tax that is associated with procurement, you see procurement, playing a more strategic role in organization as compared to purchasing. So, for instance, if you want to talk about what are the steps involved in purchasing or the purchasing process, it is obtaining a purchase requisition, requesting proposals and evaluating quotations, dispatching official purchase orders, receiving products and services, checking the quality of the delivered items, and effecting payments. So you could see the simplified nature of purchasing as compared to the more elaborate nature of the activities that are involved in procurement as compared to purchasing. So let us situate purchasing as being part of the procurement process, because the procurement is a total end-to-end process, and even these two functions can still be considered as still being a subset of the total supply chain management process. You see, so the complexity of the function of procurement, the complexity of purchasing, and then in the context of supply chain management, these functions, and I'll get into the area where PPA is beginning to help the various procurement institutions and associations in the country to find a way to have a more coordinated, institute that will be able to deal with the requirements and the needs of the various subsets of the supply chain management process. So in a nutshell, this afternoon, we have attempted to draw a distinction between procurement as a function and purchasing as an activity.
I see. So what you are telling us, Mr. J, is that, and if I understand what you said, purchasing is a subset, which is more of a clerical duty.
Tactical, routine clerical function.
For a procurement officer,
yes,
if I want to put it that way.
Yeah.
Now, I want us to, for the benefit of our SME friends or SME guys, I want us to walk us through a normal, because sometimes people say, I walk into an office, okay, they want to buy, let's say, mobile phones. All I feel is that they want to purchase mobile phones. So I can just walk in and tell them, these are my quotations for my mobile phones. So why don't you just buy them? I mean, as an SME or a mobile phone seller around Circle, I have a shop and everything. What if you can describe the ideal situation when it comes to the procurement process and then the purchasing process, beyond the explanation you have given in terms of the difference?
Great. So having given this background information, we can then be looking at various types of procurement. Now, let us also look at whether there is a distinction between a public procurement system and a private procurement system.
I was thinking we'll come to that, but before then, I just want an ideal situation when you describe to us what the procurement officer will be expecting, just if they are supposed to do something in terms of either purchase or anything, and then what just the normal purchasing officer will do. What are the processes?
Yes, you can only explain and describe that within the context of a private procurement process,
okay,
and a public procurement process.
Very well.
That is the only time that you can situate the true process. That a typical SME or an entrepreneur will want to avail himself or herself to. Now, the difference between public procurement and private procurement has to do with the source of funding. So essentially, when we're talking about procurement, the definition that I've given for procurement and that of purchasing will not typically be different in a private sector environment and public sector environment. The difference, though, is the source of funding. Whereas in the case of public sector, we are dealing with public funds, state funds, all right, to undertake a procurement activity. In the case of the private sector procurement, that funds belongs to the private sector. And therefore, they do not have the kind of well set out regulations and legislations that, as it were, guide the conduct of the processes in that sector. So now let us shift from the let us shift to the public procurement process. If you come to the public procurement process, which in this country and in most of the countries, emerging economies in the world have developed through an act of parliament, Ghana is not different. So in our circumstance here in Ghana, we are operating our public procurement processes under the Public Procurement Act. And the Act has spelled out various methods, various processes, various procedures to be followed. So if you are a Ghanaian, and you are or let's say if you are a Ghanaian entrepreneur, and you want to assess the public procurement process here in this country, there are four ways by which you could assess this public procurement in this country. That will depend on, first and foremost, a method of procurement that is being used by the entity concerned. And the method of procurement that an entity can apply depends on the threshold, that is, on the value of the procurement that he wants to carry. So for a small scale enterprise or a small and medium enterprises, as well as entrepreneurs in Ghana, let us start with the lowest value procurements.
Very well.
Yes. So for the lowest value procurements, which the current law provides that if you want to procure goods, which is up to 20,000 Ghana cedis, 100,000 Ghana cedis.
That's a lot of money.
Yes, 100,000 Ghana cedis. You are required to use requests for quotation method.
Okay.
Now, the request for quotation method simply means that you are supposed to float a request, okay? And that request doesn't have to be by a public notice. When I say a public notice, it is not through advertisement.
Advertisement.
No. You are supposed to pick from amongst your set of registered suppliers, which you have compiled internally, to pick a minimum of 3 up to about 6, and then invite them to bring their quotations to tender. Now, this is normally for off-the-shelf items, products that are not complex in its description, and therefore it is very easy for people to, put up an offer to be able to be considered after evaluation.
So when a company is looking for toiletries,
if you're looking for toiletries,
stationery.
You're looking for computer accessories, you're looking for stationery, sometimes even ticketing and other services, which are very basic to an organization. You normally will want to go for this method, which is the request for quotation method. Now, for a supplier to be able to partake in this process, currently, as we speak, your requirements are that you must register with the Public Procurement Authority. The Public Procurement Authority, under Section 3, subsection 3P, is required to maintain a central supplier database. And so we have commenced a process of registering all providers in this country. We use the word providers because it includes contractors, suppliers, consultants.
All of them?
Yes, because a contractor is a provider, a consultant is a provider, and a supplier is a provider. So we have opened a registration center portal where we are getting all these suppliers registered so that we as a regulator, PPA, will have a central supplier database, and all entities are required to pool their required database, that is their own internal database, from the central database.
Doesn't mean that even a private firm
Yes.
will have to pull from your central database.
No, a private firm is not under the scope of application of the law.
Of the law.
Yes,
So
but
these are the
all,
public firms.
Yes, all state enterprise, state institutions who comes under the scope of application of the procurement law are required to pull from the PPA's central supplier database and develop an internal supplier database. It is out of this database that they compile that they are required to pick a couple of them to request them to tender for any procurement activity that becomes available. So that is one way that a supplier will be required to get himself into the state procurement system. Now, in the registration process, when you come and you have to be registered, you will be required to provide some basic information that we will have to authenticate and be able to verify and then put you on this central supplier database. Some of the requirements for the registration includes, but not limited to, the following. You need to have a certificate of incorporation, if it's a limited liability, or certificate of registration, which is in the case of enterprises. Sole proprietorship.
Sole proprietorships.
You also need to have a certificate to commence business if it is a limited liability, but in the case of enterprise, the certificate of registration is enough. You also need to have a VAT registration certificate issued by GRA, okay? And then you need to have a SNET clearance certificate. You see, because in our laws, you are required that it is a requirement that any company that employs more than 2 people must have a SNET registration to be able to pay the SNET contribution
of the
workers that they have employed. So you need, as a requirement, to show proof that your company is not a DEX company, or it's not a suitcase company, that you walk on the corridors of entities and institutions and produce and generate invoices from your suitcase. You have to come and show proof that it is a registered company, you've got workers that you're working with, and that you need to have that SNET clearance certificate. Then you also will have to submit Form 3 and 4 of the business registration certificate. That is the form that indicates the directors of the company. Now, this has become a requirement because we have had occasions where people will have about 8, 6, 10 companies registered in their names. And during tendering, they will want to submit about 4 of these same companies which have got different names.
Yeah.
All right? Yeah. But then the different ownership, different names but same ownership. They want to tender 4 of them and give a semblance of competition. So the man has brought you company XYZ, company 124, company Yabua, and company Ekuyasewa. And then he has got 4 companies presented. But with the current type of registration that we are undertaking, we will request you to bring your Form 3 and Form 4, which has the details of the directors. So we will at any point in time be able to determine that the companies that you have tendered, those companies are all owned by one person and therefore cannot be allowed to undertake a competition or a competitive tender.
Does that mean that automatically that person will be ruled out with all his 4 companies, or you only allow one to go through the process?
We only allow one to go because all the 4 companies, by the legal requirements, are legally registered companies. But in terms of competition in the procurement process, we will not, because we have fraud, procurement fraud, one of which this type of practice will be considered as a fraud in procurement.
And you also want to prevent conflict of interest.
And also conflict of interest.
Okay.
All right? So that is the kind of requirements. Now, with regards to contractors, if you come to PPA to register, and you are a contracting firm, we will want you to produce works and housing certificate if you are into construction of buildings and civil works.
Okay.
We will also ask you to submit your roads and highway certificates if you are a contractor involved in roads and bridges. So these are requirements for specific, providers, that is contractors. So if you come in to register as a contractor, we want to know whether you are a civil and building contractor or you are roads and bridges contractor, in which case we will demand the certification from these two institutions. Again, when you provide these certificates are in classifications. They are classified, meaning that if you come and you say you are a contractor, you are building roads and bridges contractor, for instance, the classification certificate that the Ministry of Works and Housing issues is classified into 4 categories. We have class A1 and B1 contractor. We have class A2 and B2 contractor. We have A3 and B3 contractor. And we have A4 and B4 contractor. Now, let me explain the significance of these classifications. The classes are meant to determine the level of capacity that every contractor has to undertake a project.
Okay.
So, for instance, if there is a tender in the papers, or we have invited 6 tenderers to do a restrictive tendering, we will look at the value of the contract. If you see the value of the estimated value of the contract, that will determine the class of contractors that are qualified under this classification to be able to participate in that bid. So for the A1, B1 class of contractors, they have no limit. It means they can bid for any contract to any tune. But then for A2 and B2 contractors, as we speak, the upper limit is $4 million. So if you are A2, B2 contractor, you can bid for government contracts up to the tune of $4 million.
$4 million.
So if there is a bid or a tender out there that has a value of $8 million, a A2, B2 contractor cannot participate because he will not have the capacity to undertake that contract. And so that is how we rate these contractors as they come to do registration. And so if you provide all this information to PPA, we will then be able to put you on our website, on the supplier database, to give all prospective entities that are looking for suppliers, looking for contractors, to be able to go there and determine that for this particular tender, this is the class of contractors that I'm looking for. And then he'll be able to make a selection out of the A2, B2, or the A3, B3 contractors. And then these are the set of contractors who will be qualified to participate in that tender.
I'm sure you have a lot more to tell us as far as the criteria or things that you need to be able to participate in any kind of tendering process here in Ghana, especially with the government agencies. But just to remind you that the masterclass is brought to you by GOIL, and GOIL says new super synthetic 5W20 and the 5W30 loops is the best engine oil for your vehicle. They are specifically engineered engine oils which efficiently work on all modern petrol and diesel engines or any kind of vehicle that you have. They clean, protect, reduce fuel consumption, prolong oil change intervals, and also enhance your engine performance from start up till you switch off that engine of yours. Go to any GOIL filling station and grab the new oil super synthetic 5W20 and 5W30 engine oil for superior vehicle performance. Remember, GOIL, good energy, and GOIL, Yenara. Yeah, dear, and just to remind you that you can be part of our conversation by sending your messages to 0244 340 437, or you can also call us. I'm going to be opening the phone lines shortly. And remember that the lines to call will be 0302 216 and 541. But I have a question for you, Mr. J.
Sure.
You said that we needed, or whoever it is, or the company that wants to participate must have a VAT registration certificate. In this day where we have the TIN, or you say the tax identification number, is that a requirement? If it is, if I have the TIN, why do I have to also bring you a VAT registration certificate? I mean, if you can help us understand that.
Yeah, the VAT clearance or the VAT registration certificate has got a TIN number on it. All right. So if we ask you to produce a VAT registration certificate, we'll be able to authenticate your TIN number. It's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that.
Yes.
So it means that if I am not, even if I have a TIN number,
no, because
and I don't have the VAT registration
That is
certificate, automatically if I put in a tender, I will be disqualified.
No, not that. You see, the question is somebody is giving you a number. How do you authenticate the number? When you have the VAT clearance certificate, the TIN number is indicated there. So why don't you bring me a document that has your TIN number on it for me to vouch it and say that this is your TIN number? But of course, if somebody is processing like this, paperless clearance at the ports, all right?
Yeah.
Once you input your TIN number into the system automatically will identify you and have the company name and what have you. But in our case, what we are doing at our registration center is that we are authenticating documents to be sure that once you are placed on our system, then we know that you have what it takes, and then we have also got this integration with these institutions, GRA, SNET, to be able to, assess their database,
Okay.
to authenticate the information that you have given to
So you
people.
don't need to go to the office. You just sit behind your machine.
Yes,
and
behind our machine. That's the kind
and
of
you're able
portal-
to do that.
Yes, the system. will
Okay,
use.
thank you very much. But let's take a quick break. And then when we come back, I will open the phone lines. And just as I said, the phone line is 0302 216 541 or 0244 340 437. And you can also send us text messages on WhatsApp. That is 0244. That is 340 437. So we're going for this quick break. And when we come back, we'll open the phone lines.
The masterclass is in session, and you can interact with us via Facebook at Joy Business or at Joy 99.7 FM. And if you tweet, the handle is at Joy 997 FM. Don't forget to hashtag masterclass. You can also send us a text on 1422 across all networks, or join the WhatsApp conversation on 0244 340437, and our facilitators will address your concerns. Attention everyone, class is in progress.
Welcome back. It is the master class, and my name is Norvan Akwaheford. I'm sitting in for your regular host, Banafo, who is probably cooling off somewhere in the Caribbean. He's on leave, and he's asked me to sit in for him. And our guest today is no other person than the CEO for the Public Procurement Authority, that is PPA, Mr. ABAJ, and he's taken us through to understand what you need to do if you want to participate in any tendering process, or if there's anything the government wants to purchase or acquire, what you have to do, and helping us to understand the difference between procurement and purchasing. Today, we are just looking at starting it right. And so he's taking us through the fundamentals, what the things that you need to have and be ready, so that if government has to do any business, why not? Next week, we have another topic for you, and he's going to be with us for the whole of the month of August. But now the phone lines are activated. You can call us and ask us any question that you have. But first, let me go to our WhatsApp console, and there's a question here. It says, "Good afternoon, my name is Stephen. From what your guest is saying about the scope of procurement, it means they have to certify that the product or service is fit for purpose before the product or service provided is paid. The big question is, how come road contractors are doing inferior roads and they are being paid for this bad work?" Well, I'm sure that my guest will try and help you understand these things. As for the procurement man, he will be able to let you understand what it means. I cannot answer that question. And that's what Stephen, the kind of question that Stephen has.
Yeah, that's a very wonderful question there. What we have to say to Stephen is that, as I said, and when I gave the end-to-end process of the procurement cycle, I did mention that among other things will be to ensure that goods that are produced or contracts that are executed meets the quality standards that were set. Now, this aspect of procurement involves what we call contract management.
Okay, Mr. J, I think we have Mohammed from Tamale on the phone, and so let's take Mohammed. Hello, good afternoon to you, Mohammed.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah, so Mohammed, you can go ahead with your question.
Yes, I just want to ask the professional in your studio that is it mandatory for public institutions to sell tender documents? And what is the reason behind selling tender documents? Because if they can be provided for prospective bidders for free, because they are not refundable, and is it sold to recover the printing cost of the tender document, or what is the reason? Is it by law, or is just they do it by themselves?
All right, thank you very much, Mohammed. I'll take Stephen from Accra, and then we'll come back for Mr. J to be able to answer the question. Hello, good afternoon to you, Stephen.
Yes, no, I'm Stephen from Mangasim.
Oh, okay, it's rather Mangasim. All right, go ahead with your question, please.
You know, when I saw your artwork, I switched off. When you talk about public procurement, what you say in the studio is the ideal situation. But the reality on the ground is that you need to have political connection. You need to pay bribes. It's fraught with massive corruption. You and I know that. So this one is on paper. The reality on the ground is what you're talking about here. And the reality is that since persons who engage in these practices are not honest, we are not going to have people coming in to, bid for contracts, on the basis of their competence or something. That is the reality.
Well, so Stephen, just before you go ahead, what Mr. J is doing is to let us understand what the processes should be. And I'm sure he will go ahead and even talk about the punishments that are available and how you can get redress if you think that you have not been treated well. So that shouldn't be a problem at all, Stephen, for us. Yes. Yes.
You file a complaint, wait for the next 100 years. Bye-bye.
Well, I really don't know what Stephen is talking about. But then let me come back to you, Mr. J, to answer the two questions that we have. And then after that, we would go back to the text console. But the phone lines are still activated. We have just about 5 minutes to wrap up the show. If you have any question, why not? You can call us now, 030-2216-541 or 024434 0473, or you can also send your text messages through Telegraph on the same number, 0244340437. Yeah, Mr. J.
I want to complete the answer for the first one. Yeah, the issue he's talking about has got to do with contract management, and I must admit that as a nation we have a serious challenge with contract management, and because the regulator has identified that aspect of the procurement cycle as having a challenge. And for that matter, we're having serious cases of shoddy works, and the people who are to certify them for payment are also compromising. We have developed various models, for contract management, and we are going to aggressively, train the procurement professionals and the institutions into very world-class contract management and good practices in contract management. So contract management, we admit, has been a challenge. We are dealing with it, but there is still room to do more. And that is what actually leads to cases like what the gentleman brought up.
Okay, so we move to the Tamale
Mohammed, yes.
Mohammed
Mohammed
yes.
is saying wants to find out whether it is mandatory for public institutions to sell tender documents.
Exactly.
Yes, the manuals of Public Procurement Authority requires that institutions can sell tender documents only to recover the cost of printing. And I want to make that emphasis. They are allowed to sell the tender document only to recover the costs of printing the tender documents. Therefore, if you come out to charge 2,000 Ghana cedis for the sale of a tender document, that is totally unacceptable.
I see. If it's unacceptable, who can they report to the authority?
They can report to the authority.
Okay.
Yes.
And the authority will go through it and then
the necessary sanctions will be undertaken. But let me assure Stephen, who said that when you make a complaint to PPA, it will take 100 years. We have an appeals, legal and administrative complaints committee of the PPA board. And I tell you the kind of job we are doing. When we read one of our rulings to you, you may liken it to a Supreme Court ruling. We are doing extremely well in that area, so we are encouraging. If you are a supplier, you are a contractor, and you are a service provider, and you feel aggrieved for having taken part in any tendering process, please lodge your complaint through the appropriate channel, because the appropriate channel is that first your complaint must go to the entity within itself. 21 days. If you do not hear from them, or if you hear from them and you are not satisfied, please come to PPA and you will get a proper hearing for your
complaint or your case. Okay, so this is I think you don't have your name, but please, when you send us the text messages, add your name. Okay, it says Fuseni. How can I reach? Okay, you want to reach Mr. J, you want him to coach you, why not? But your question is it also possible to have access to the supplier database for the private sector?
Yes, because it is this supplier database is on the PPA website, and it is open to anybody, both private and public, who wants to take advantage of the suppliers in this country.
Some in Accra also write, please, the law prohibits bulk breaking. However, that is the government of Ghana funding staggers in bits. If this situation promotes bulk breaking in the end, because items are needed, whose fault is it? I mean, talking about bulk breaking, I don't know what he's actually referring to.
Yeah, the law frowns on bulk breaking, and it is one of the infractions in the law. So bulk breaking is not permitted under the law. And therefore, if an institution is engaged in bulk breaking, the attention of the authorities must be sought for.
Okay, I think that Fuseni came again and he says, why is it that we don't have works department in the PPA and also making it mandatory for the regulator or the regulatory requirement, so that you can have quantity surveyors who can also help ensure that what ought to be done, they can audit the process that these things have been followed.
He's saying we don't have works department in PPA. Yeah, but then the question is, PPA has got the necessary and the requisite personnel that deals with matters that involves works. We have quantity surveyors, we have project engineers, and we also have got project management personnel who are able to, navigate through these complex requirements when they come to the PPA's attention.
Okay, so if you've been listening, this is the master class, and we ought to say goodbye to you. There's more that we can talk about, or we will. Next week, we are looking at getting ready for competition. Today, we've taken you through what are the things that you need to do. We have come to understand that the procurement authority is putting together a database. So as far as or so long as you are a service provider, a consultant, whatever that you are, go to their website. You can get the information there, provide what you need to provide. You'll be in their database. Then you can compete or be part of the tendering process as far as government of Ghana is concerned. And my guest, as I said, has been the CEO for the Public Procurement Authority. My name is Norman Akwa-Hayford, and this is how we end the masterclass for today. As I said, next week we're back here and we are looking at getting ready for the competition. Thank you very much, Mr. J, for coming. We are grateful to you. We'll see you next week, Wednesday. And it's time for the news. And my good friend, Kobla Adum, is here.
Right.